happy to be here. I will take you through myself, obviously, and the next three speakers, and we'll end the session with a panel discussion where I'll take the questions from you guys. Looking forward to that. Starting off, talking about branding, I was excited to come here to talk about branding and branding through retail. We've moved from an era where branding was about creating an emotional relationship between consumer and brand. And during the last couple of 10, 20 years, we've sort of moved away from this proposition into something which I find slightly more interesting. We used to believe that if a brand had certain values, a brand had certain affinities, I, as a consumer, would like the brand, I would associate myself with the brand, and at the end of the day, when I walked down into the store, I would most probably buy the brand because I love the brand. Today, what we're seeing is that it's much more about creating a shopping community between a brand and its, a shopping relationship, sorry, between a brand and its community, its shoppers. What do I mean by that? I mean that the interesting thing about the iPod, when Apple launched the iPod, was not as much the iPod. It was not innovative in sort of its substance. The technology was developed by somebody else. Apple was not a major brand, was not a major player. There was all sorts of interesting things that was not interesting about Apple's iPod. But what was interesting was, in fact, the digital supermarket, iTunes, that came with the iPod. So it was not so much the device itself, but the fact that they created a shopping forum, a shopping community behind the brand that allowed us to understand the possibilities of digital music. And Apple has taken this radical retail revolution even into the stores. So today when we talk about Apple, it's not so much from a product perspective, even though we think they are. They're developing phones, but everybody else is. They're developing portable music, everybody else is. They're developing computers, and so many others are. But where Apple, in true, where they create true radical innovation, is in essence in retail. So the interesting thing is that the world's smallest computer brand is suddenly becoming a retailer that we're all admiring and talking about. Another example, which is a bit more low-tech, Starbucks. I mean, a cup of coffee was a cup of coffee until Starbucks came along. And the interesting thing about the Starbucks cup of coffee is the one-on-one manufacturing that happens every day when people walk into a Starbucks, and together we create that cup of coffee. So one can say that the whole brand experience is really driven by the creation of that coffee together between consumer and brand. Build-A-Bear. You can go anywhere in the world and you can buy a teddy bear. And only in Build-A-Bear, you're actually allowed to create your own bear. For a lot of people, including myself, this would be cumbersome, spending 3 hours dancing and singing and hugging salespeople in order to buy a teddy bear. The interesting thing is that this whole shopping experience is what creates the brand. So the retail experience is building the brand. Another example, Abercrombie. Is it fashion? Is it hip? Is it trendy? Not really. They've been making the same clothes for the last 20, 30 years. But where they suddenly popped onto the scene was the instant they understood that the place they were creating their brand was in the retail environment. Through sound, to smell, half-naked boys, everything creating that unique shopping experience at the point of retail. So what I talk a lot about is what I call the branded buy. We spend an awful lot amount of time creating our brand, but sometimes we tend to forget that shopping our brand is just as important as our brand. That the shopping context surrounding our brand is in actuality what creates our brand the strongest. My most quoted quote, my favorite quote of all times, by now a very, very old quote, is a quote by Procter & Gamble's former CEO, Lafley, saying that there's only two moments of truth, when people buy your product and when they try your product. So everything else surrounding, when people talk about your product, when they laugh at your product, when they love your product, is all really important parts of the marketing mix. But at the end of the day, where money is being made, where brand affinity and brand loyalty and consumer preference is being made, is at that point where we're buying the product and when we're trying the product. So what we're seeing now from a point of marketing is that everything we do in marketing, the way we create brands, are getting closer and closer to that point of purchase, getting closer and closer to that instant where people are buying the brand. And what I like to call branding from the shelf and out. Starting, I guess, untraditionally, by understanding what happens at that point of purchase and working our way out of the store instead of the other, more traditional way in. This has become even more important in a day and age where we're clicking and buying, where the possibility of purchase is infinite. And it's always around us because we're all running around with a sales channel in our pockets. Being able to purchase a brand and clicking and purchasing a brand at any time, at any point during the day, anywhere in the world. So with the whole digitalization and the rise of e-commerce, mobile shopping, and so forth, understanding how to create that sale right here and right now becomes much more important than creating the long-term brand affinity, building effect of working your brand over and over again over time. So what we're seeing with marketing, what we're concerning ourselves with is the business of creating what we call instant desire. We can't afford anymore to build brands for a long, long time, hoping that at some point down the road, people will actually like the brand so much that they might buy it. We need to understand how we make people buy now and react now. So the business of creating instant desire, or saying it differently, the business of creating instantly accessible and purchasable desire. Because we as consumers are now used to the fact of being able to do that 24/7, anywhere from any device at any point. Some years ago, I talked to the CEO the Danish CEO actually of H&M, Rolf Eriksen, and I sort of asked him how he succeeded in taking H&M from being a very, very big brand to a huge and enormous retailer, doubling, in fact, his business in the course of a very short time. And he said that for years at H&M, they only concerned themselves with two things in what they call the 2 × 6 seconds. And those were the 6 seconds they figured out that people on average spent deciding on whether they would go into an H&M or not. And then the following 6 seconds that they on average would spend deciding on whether they're going to spend money on that H&M or not. So his point was, as long as I hit the 2 × 6 seconds, my business will go pretty okay. Meaning that we're in a situation where it's about getting the brand just right in the minds of the shoppers right now, right here. Now in that context, things are changing. My brand, Oracle, is no longer on TV. People don't really watch TV anymore, and from the point of me watching a commercial on TV to me going down to a store, the gap is just too long. What we're seeing now is that the store itself has become the new brand temple. This is where we make brands come alive. This is where we make brands happen. Because in actuality, and most of you here at ESUP early this morning, there is no place where we can tell our story as strong. The retail environment has become our biggest, strongest, and most effective storyteller. Now, this is my favorite slide, because it doesn't make any sense. But what happened in '96 when the internet suddenly hit upon us? At that point, we really didn't understand what happened, and now we're just only seeing the beginnings of the digital revolution. But one fact about the digital revolution is that it has resulted in some interesting factors. For years, we've been talking about fragmentation, which is hitting us again and again and harder and harder. The fragmentation of the world, markets, media, consumers. Back in the old days, it was fairly easy creating a branded campaign on TV. You would hit a lot of people. Today, most young people don't watch TV, and the media universe is so fragmented. We've gone from a situation where we say that the brand, my mouth, will talk to you as an audience, moving over to us talking about peer-to-peer, to a world now where, with Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, everything else out there from a social media context is so strong that we're talking about a world of mouths. And I can't even pronounce that. And the interesting thing from a brand building perspective is who constructs and controls the brand story in this environment? How can I control my brand story when there's millions and millions of people on social media defining my brand content? How can I control the story that I want to tell about my brand? And the interesting thing, the more fragmented the world has become, really only one place has consolidated, and that's retail. Retail chains have become bigger, more global. The retail environment is more and more homogeneous. Whether I'm in Hong Kong or Sydney or Bangkok or Copenhagen, I will expect to find the same stores. If I don't find them, I will shop on my phone. Leaving actually retail to become, that's hard to read, the global mass communication channel. If you want to communicate one thing about your brand in a secure environment, going global, retail is really the only effective solution. Bringing me to China, how would you launch a big brand in China if not through a retail format? Could you ever, as a European, a Danish company, go into this marketplace hoping through traditional advertising, traditional marketing to launch your brand? Or is retail really, in actuality, the most effective way of doing that? Why is retail so effective? Retail is so effective because it offers us total brand control. Total brand control, meaning that in terms of sight, sound, location, pricing, imagery, people working there, even people who I allow into my shop. My control is absolutely 100%, which is in sharp contrast to all my other media possibilities. In a world of social media, there's really no control over my brand anymore. But at the point of retail, I can still construct the story precisely as I want it. So what I tell most of my clients are, if you don't have a strong retail strategy, you don't really have a strong brand. If you don't concern yourself about the buying context surrounding your brand, you really don't have a brand strategy. And the interesting thing and most important thing is also that we have to be more than just a store. Our expectation as consumers have risen so dramatically in terms of what we expect a store to be able to do for us. Most retailers still have this view of their stores. It's about order, about logistics, about having the merchandise all over the place, clear pricing, clear navigation, and so forth, which in essence is still very true. But what the consumers are looking for is this. This is why they choose to come to your store. They're looking for a completely different experience. They're looking to spend quality time with your brand. They're looking to still be able to shop, still be able to navigate clearly. But they're expecting the shop to do something more for them than just being a shop. And what we're seeing out there is, in reality, too many brand museums, too many totally boring, uninvolving, pretty stores, but very, very few what I call brand-consistent, value-adding customer experiences, which is in essence what modern retail is about. And modern retail is strongly about this because in a world where we can shop everything on our iPads, where commerce on iPads, on phones, and so forth is just rising and rising and rising, if the store has to have any meaning as a brand communicator, as a brand loyalty creator, as a forum and as a community, we need to be able to allow the store to do something completely different and not just be a replica of our online solution. Is your brand a desirable, value-adding buying experience for your customers? This is the question that we need to ask ourselves as brand owners. Do we have a retail format? If not, we don't have a brand. And if we have a retail format, does it deliver on this? Okay, I want to end, because I'm already done, I want to end with a movie, a 3-minute and 20-minute, 3-minute and 20-second movie. That will, otherwise we'll be here for a long time, and I'm sure I don't have time for that, which I find fascinating and super inspiring. It's a very, very quiet, very beautiful movie that tells us a story of a luxury brand that tells us everything about themselves through the simple narrative of how they renovated their new flagship store. So please sort of dwell back, enjoy this, and look at how important building brands through retail in actuality has become. Forget that address. I promise you. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.